Right now, let's talk about a book that is right now. A book that hopefully will raise awareness and provide support for Asians suffering from mental illness. A local man is campaigning for just that. His name is Kalwinder Singh Dhindsa, and he's written a book about suicide. The book is called My Father and the Lost Legend of Pear Tree. Kalwinder, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Tell me, first of all, about why you are campaigning and why you've written this book, campaigning for more awareness of Asians suffering from mental illness.
Well, obviously, my biggest concern with this is I wrote the book because my father, Mahinder Singh, took his own life in March 2000.
What's he like as a man?
He was a very nice man, a very pleasant man, always helpful, always smiling. But obviously, over the years, he had bouts of depression that would bring him down, and that kind of put a negative aspect on his life that sometimes used to bring him down, and we used to hear the brunt of his negativity and his downheartedness at home.
So you as children used to see that and sense that?
Yes, it was an incident that happened in 1993. Basically, an event happened outside my house that I've written about in the book, which left my father on a life support machine for a week, and the whole of Derby expected him to die, but thankfully he managed to get himself out of that coma, let's say, and things were never quite the same after that. There was a lot of bitterness in his life as to how, what had happened to him, how he was treated, and I feel that some of that past history may have caught up with him in the end in terms of, his later life.
How did that affect you?
Well, I mean, prior to that incident in 93, he was always jolly, he was always outgoing, but after the incident, when he had his brain injury, you could say, he had a more negative outlook on life. He still smiled, he still, tried to get on with people, but you could always feel something simmering in the background, and he always had a great disadvantage in that he was not the best communicator. Although he could speak Punjabi, his English was not the best, so it was always a case that he just couldn't quite get the words out to express himself, and sometimes the only way he could do that is when he got drunk, and then the real truth used to come out of him.
And is that something that changed after this incident, that he drank and his personality, it seems, changed?
Well, that incident happened in 93, so yes, the personality did change. He would always drink. I mean, he was never what you could class as an alcoholic, but he just used to, when he did drink at weddings and so on, he used to really,
He'd be a little bit more honest.
Yeah, you could say that.
Let's bring it forward to March 2006 then, and tragically, your dad took his own life. What were the circumstances? What happened there?
Well, about 3 months previously, his elder brother did exactly the same. He took his life as well by suicide. So my father was in the Punjab at the time that his brother took his life, and he went on one particular day, and then 3 days later he was coming back to England, having found out that his brother had passed away. And that day, the look on my father's face that day, it was of a broken man who wanted to do everything in his power to save his brother. He knew he had depression and so on, but he realized he couldn't and he hadn't, and his whole meaning in life just disintegrated after that day. He just kind of gave up.
And how did you find out what had happened?
I found on March the 1st, 2006, I was at school. I was training to become a teacher, and I had the last period of the day free, and I was in the reprographics department just chatting to the staff there, and then I received a phone call, and a member of the science department says, "Cal, your brother's on the phone. He wants to have a word with you." And my first thought was, what would my brother be doing phoning me at school? It's not something that would happen or has ever happened before. So I knew that something was wrong.
Immediately the alarm bells ring when something like that happens, don't they?
They did. I mean, the walk to the staff room itself wasn't a very long walk, so I kind of knew something was up. And as soon as I picked up the phone, it was my brother saying, "Come home, Dad's hanged himself." And I just switched off. I just didn't know what to think. I just drifted off into my own little world, thinking, what on earth is going on?
Yeah, such a shock. Had you you mentioned obviously he'd lost his brother, and you say you felt he'd sort of given up a little bit. Had you noticed anything to suggest that he was going to take his own life?
In terms of suicide, I and my family believed he wouldn't take the same route as his brother, because certain members of my family asked him whether he had suicidal thoughts, and he always implied that he didn't, and he wouldn't go down that route because that route was wrong. So we were tricked into believing that he wouldn't take his life. But I've written in the book that there were many questions, and things he would ask us that used to get under our skins. We used to think he was just picking at faults or, trying to push us away. But he was asking questions like, do you know the alarm number? Do you know where the key to the back window is? Do you know where the such and such is paid? Or do you know the... And it was all these questions, and we at the time thought, why is he constantly, let it go? But later realised what he was trying to do. He was trying to push us away, drive a wedge between himself and us, maybe have an excuse to do what he planned to do. It was his way of like pushing us away to give him the excuse to do what he wanted to do. But at the time, when you're told, when he has told me and other members of my family that he's not going to take this route of suicide, we believed him.
Of course, you take that at face value, and you don't spot these signs. To lose your dad in this way must have been very, very hard for you to understand.
It was. I was 26 at the time. I was a grown man. I'd just been married for, 4, 5, 6 months, and my life was going off at a tangent, and I seemed to be distracted by it all. I wanted to pass my teaching year. I wanted to, be happily married and all that, but in the back of my mind was this feeling of negativity and this knowing that my dad was struggling with his life, with his depression, and yet, I was being taken in one direction, he was being taken in the other direction, and I just couldn't get into him. I just couldn't talk to him. He wasn't giving any information as to what was happening to him and whether he needed help or not. And I think, it's always tormented me, because when he did take his life, he had this piece of paper in his shirt pocket, and it had my dad's name on it, his date of birth. It had my mum's name on it, her date of birth, and my mum's place of work, the phone number, obviously when his body was found and so on. But what tormented me the most is that he never had my name on that piece of paper, or my brother's, or my sister's, and it always made me think, it tormented me. Did he stop loving us? Did he not love us anymore? Why did he do this? And that was a question that tormented me, because I knew I'd never get an answer. It wasn't as if my dad was going to come back and say, no, that wasn't the case. I knew I would never get an answer from that.
And sometimes you need those answers. You really, to move on, sometimes you want those answers, don't you?
I needed that answer, but I knew I'd never get it. So for a number of years, my life wasn't really going anywhere. It wasn't going forward. I mean, I passed my teaching year and everything. I was still teaching, but in the back of my mind, I constantly had that thought, did he not love us? Did he stop loving us? And it tormented me until one day I finally got the answer I was looking for, and I was able to kind of move on.
And that answer, I mean, I understand the death of Robin Williams actually changed some of the way you were thinking about your dad's death.
Yes, indeed. It was only when Robin Williams passed away, and I first read the news of his death on Twitter, and at first my heart sank a little, because I remember Robin Williams from the old days, and the great films he was in, the TV series he was in, and it was a great sadness that I felt, especially when I found out he had taken his life. But then I wanted to find out a bit more, and later on I found out that he had been suffering from Alzheimer's-like conditions, Parkinson's-like conditions. He had Lewy bodies, or things like that, dementia-like, and some of the symptoms that he was suffering from in terms of hallucinations and this idea of constantly being in pain, I recognized that in my father, and some of the things he would tell us sometimes before he would close up and shut down, I recognized once and for all, and it was such a relief, and I finally accepted it, that my father had a mental illness, and that is what corrupted his mind. So when he made that decision to take his life, it wasn't that he didn't love us. It wasn't that, I was to blame or someone else was to blame that tipped him over. It was because his mind had been corrupted, and this is the route he had to take.
I'll tell you what, Cal, a perfect point to just take a little break for some music and come back and hear how you've gone forward from that revelation, which seems to have been so cathartic for you. Cal with me tonight. We'll get the rest of the story after this.
With the Asian community, with the Punjabi, go like this, you never have an answer.
Just the point where, funnily enough, Late Night GT, it's Monday night with Stuart Ellis in for Graham this week, and I'm talking to Kalwinder Dhindsa, who's challenging the stigma of mental illness after losing his father to suicide. Cal, we left it there, just the point where, funnily enough, or ironically, it was Robin Williams' passing that caused you to reevaluate the whole circumstances around your dad's death.
Yeah. Robin Williams' death made me accept that my father had a mental illness. I mean, for a long time before that, I knew he was depressed. But the thing is, for a long time, I had wished that I knew for sure how he died, why he died. For example, if he had been run over by a bus, let's say, at least I could have said he's been run over by a bus and that's it. But with depression, with suicide, when they go like this, you never have an answer. But with Robin Williams' death, I finally accepted that his mind was corrupted, he had a mental illness, and that's why he went down this road and had to take his life.
And what about that asking for help? Was that difficult? Was your dad the kind of person who was perhaps too proud to do that? And because men are, especially, aren't they? It's, I've got to be strong. I'm the head of the family. I can't show weakness. Would that have stopped him from saying, actually, I need some help here?
Most definitely. It's not only a man issue, it's also a cultural issue with the Asian community, with the Punjabi community. The men are seen as the breadwinners. They are seen as the top man, let's say, of the house. It would have been difficult for him to come out with the fact that he was struggling. It would have been difficult to come out to the community. It would have been difficult to come out to his own children, me included. Once he did try to tell me that there was something wrong with him, he tried to describe what was going on in his head. And the thing is, as I started questioning him further, he just as quickly closed up and shut up, and that made me even more frustrated. So as this was happening, the lead up to his suicide, I was getting extremely frustrated with him as well, because I wanted him to be happy. I wanted him to, as they say, snap out of it. We all know that's nothing you can really do if you're struggling like this. But, he had the frustrations there, I had the frustrations there, and it all came to a point one day on March the 1st, 2006, where I woke up that day, went downstairs to ready myself for school, and I saw my dad there. And on that particular day, he seemed quite good, seemed to be different in some way. He seemed to be not happier, but he seemed to have accepted something. And to me, I thought it meant a life-changing point, as in, oh, my dad's finally, something's going to happen today, it's going to be for the good. But little did I know, in the back of his mind, he might have accepted that today was the end of his life and he was going to do what he had to do, and that was a mask he put on to show the world that then led him to do what he had to do.
And how was it for you and your brothers, your sisters, your mum, with, as you say, that if your dad had been hit by a bus, then neighbours, relatives, friends, they almost, the sympathy is there. But was there this taboo around the way his death came, the fact that he'd taken his own life, that people didn't know how to treat you guys?
I think it's more a case, there's 2 points to consider here. It's more a case that people just don't know what to say. They just don't have the words, they don't have the emotions, the experiences to talk about it. Or it's a case they don't want to talk about it because they feel that if they bring up this topic with you, they might upset me further or someone else further. But the thing is, the longer this goes on for, the longer the silences remain, and the longer this person gradually begins to be forgotten about. If these people are not coming to me, talking to me about my father, even though he was a good man, then the longer they keep this silence up, it's going to be a case that my father's memory is going to vanish, no matter how good a person he was. And I never wanted that. There was no way I could have let that happen. My father was a good man, like so many other people who have taken this route of suicide. A lot of them were good people that have battled on so bravely for so long that there comes a point when they cannot take it any longer and they have to take this route. But because they've gone down the road of suicide, it's almost the case that people don't then want to talk about them just to bring up that subject because it's too raw, too emotional, and it's not fair on these good people that pass away that they should be forgotten.
How did your mum feel? Obviously, she'd seen not only your father but his brother succumb to depression and then ultimately to suicide. Did it change the way she worried about her children? Did it change the way you worried about your brothers and sisters? Were you all sort of looking at each other thinking, is this going to happen to other members of the family?
Well, in terms of my brother, sister, and my mother, I think we all dealt with it in our own way. And if anything, I don't think we did much talking ourselves together. It might have been done individually. But in terms of my mother, she kind of distracted herself away from this by turning to her Sikh faith. So she started going to the Gurdwara more. She started becoming more religious and so on, and, went down God's road, down that direction. My sister obviously did her thing. My brother did his thing. I did my thing. I got busy. I got busy trying to distract myself. So in terms of me, what I chose to do, I chose to remember all the good times and, from the place where I was born and raised, the Pear Tree area of Derby. So I started going back in time myself to try and go to places in the past, places in the neighborhood where I knew my dad lived at the time, that would bring back happy memories.
Where he'd been happy. And is this what led to the book? Because you were writing down thoughts and things all the way through all this, and then you came together in this book, and you mentioned Pear Tree there. My Father and the Lost Legend of Pear Tree is the book. So there's an ex-footballer involved as well. How are these things linked?
Well, the years after my father passed away, the first couple of years, I was getting really bogged down with my teaching career. It was really getting me down. I was a newly qualified teacher, and I had the stresses and the anxieties of that job to deal with out there, and then I had the anxieties of home life and, constantly having my father in the back of my mind doing my heading at home. So I knew the only way I could get out of this darkness is to read up about things that interested me, that made me happy. So I started reading up about Derby. I started looking at old pictures of Derby. I just wanted to do anything that would almost like a TARDIS take me back to happier times. I'm actually a big Doctor Who fan, and that's kind of suggested in the book. So I wanted to go back to a time where my father was happy, and I was looking for books to read, and one day I stumbled across a book by an author called Peter Said, and it was a biography of Steve Bloomer, and I had it in my possession for a year or so before that, but I finally took it off the shelf and I began reading it, and I already had known that Steve Bloomer was a Derby County footballer, that he lived in Derby and so on, that he played for England, he was an absolute legend. When I started flicking through the first few pages, it suddenly struck me that this legendary footballer also lived on my street, Portland Street, just down the road, and I was so proud of this, link to my old neighborhood and my city, my town of Derby, let's say, that I just started retracing Steve Bloomer's footsteps around the Pear Tree neighborhood, the same footsteps that my father had taken many years before, the same footsteps that I had taken when I was growing up, and it just brought us all together. And I wanted to share this great joy that this legendary footballer had lived in my neighborhood, but the biography had already been written. It was such a great biography. But I also wanted to share my father's story, but I thought, nobody's going to want to read about my father's story by itself. So, and then it just finally hit me. I could write about Steve Bloomer, and I could write about my dad, and I could bring it all together and talk about this lost legend. Now, in the title, My Father and the Lost Legend of Pear Tree, I'm not implying that my father is the lost legend. I'm basically suggesting that in that old neighborhood of ours, there were many heroes, whether it be a father, a mother, the likes of Brian Clough, Peter Taylor, Dave Mackay, Steve Bloomer, they all lived there. And I wanted to draw out that, and I wanted to show that I was very proud of my neighborhood. I was very proud of the fact that my father chose Derby in 1967 to live
and settle. And you're hoping, obviously, that the book encourages people to talk about what we've been talking about tonight, which is mental health, mental illness, and for people to say if they're struggling.
Yes, most definitely. It's my hope that my story will alert people to the dangers of dismissing mental illness or not taking it seriously. I want to basically help people understand how to spot the signs. So I've talked a lot about that in my book, about the signs that I might not have picked up at the time, but if you're reading it now, you might spot the signs that this person is struggling. So I want to show people that, no matter how bad things get, there is always hope, and no matter how bad things initially seem, there's always a bit of light that you can hope that can get you out of this darkness and you can go forward with your life. Because I'm in a lot better place now that I've finished part 1 of my book, and I'm a lot happier, let's say. I mean, I still have spells of darkness myself, let's say, but I'm not in the place that I once was a few years back.
It's just been published, so if somebody's listening tonight and thinks, I'd really like to read that, where can we get a copy?
The book is available in print form and in ebook format on the Amazon website, so you can buy the print and the Kindle version there. It's also available at Derby Waterstones, Derby County Football Club, the Club Shop, and Derby Libraries as well.
So it's called My Father and the Lost Legend of Pear Tree.
Yeah.
Kal Dhindsa, thank you so much for sharing the story tonight. It's been great to talk to you.
Thank you for having me.
And if you've been affected by any of the things that Kal and I have been talking about tonight, the BBC Action Line has a range of organisations who can help, and that information is available at bbc.co.uk/actionline.